All right, you guys remember this build? This is the TRX 450 hybrid with a CRF 450 motor. But Mario's working on something new today. What do you got, buddy?
So we're working on 2020 YZ450F. This engine was the one that was in the Yamaha hybrid build that we did. There's some transmission problems with it now, so that's what we're after.
And we'll throw a link to those build videos up here in the corner. You can check out the playlist. This was out of Devin Jensen's race quad.
Yep. So one thing I pulled apart the other day because I wanted just to see if something stuck out at me with the shifting, or if something broke that I could see.
That's why it's here. It had a shifting issue.
Yeah, it's first gear works, but the rest of them, it makes a really bad grinding noise. So
when you told me that Devin blew a tranny, this isn't what I expected. Hey! I'm glad everybody's okay though.
Right. One thing I'll show though in here, the clutch for the most part looks okay, like the inner hub basket pressure plate, but I'll show like what a bad clutch looks like. The darkness on those steel plates is not supposed to be like that.
So that's the sign of a smoked clutch, is the blackness of those discs on there.
Yeah, and one thing that really needs to be watched, I mean, especially if you're really racing, these need to be taken apart and looked at all the time. Because if you ever break a fiber plate, it'll go into pieces and it can wreak havoc inside the engine. So he was fortunate that nothing happened there, but it's something to keep an eye on. But before I continue with this right side, I'm going to start with the top. Generally, that's what I do, the top, and then right-hand side, left-hand side, and then the center case. So we'll go into here, and then we'll be touching back on that right side here shortly.
So in order to get all those pieces at the bottom of the engine, the top has to come off. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, you can't access the crankshaft or the transmission without splitting it.
So we're talking about a full teardown, and we'll assume that you're going to do a rebuild video for us as well?
Yeah, we're going to do 2 steps. One will be the bottom end, and then the other one will be the top end.
Awesome. So guys, stay tuned. This is going to be a 3-parter. For now, we're going to let Mario get started on that top end.
I'm going to check valve clearance. Need to rotate the engine. Check valve clearance before we disassemble everything. That way we'll know if something's out of whack, if a valve is tight, and we can go more in depth to figure out what's going on with it. Bringing the piston to top dead center. There's a dot there. There's a dot there. And they want to be parallel with the surface of the head. I'd have to look up what the spec is, but I want to say it's between 4 and 8 thousandths on the intake, and 8 and 12 on the exhaust.
And can you describe what you're feeling? Is it a slight resistance, a little tug on there?
Yeah, there's slight resistance, and so 8 thousandths fits between the cam and the bucket, the shim bucket, where 12 thousandths does not. So that's in spec, and same thing with the intake.
Everything looks good there.
Yeah, the intake is a little tight, but a 4,000 still goes in there, but I can just feel that there's a little bit more drag there. Normally, like if you were to if the intake was here and the exhaust is here, the camshafts would be, the lobes would be away from one another. And in this, because of the way it is, they're facing inside. It's different. It's took me a little getting used to the last time I did a top end on one of these. All right, we need to take tension off the cam chain so we can remove the camshafts. So the tensioner is spring loaded, rotating it clockwise, and it'll actually, when it gets to the end, you can push it just a hair more and it will lock. You always want to make sure that you're at top dead center or close to when you're removing the cams, because if the camshaft is trying to open the valve, when you loosen these, you can break the aluminum. And they don't sell aluminum caps separately. You have to buy the whole cylinder head. There's half moon locators that go between the cam cap and the cams, and that keeps the camshaft from moving back and forth.
The notch there we're seeing?
Yeah, that notch right in there.
Yeah.
Cam cap, it looks good, no issues. Just looking to see if there's any burn marks from like a head gasket leaking. Everything looks fine there.
Why are intake valves larger than exhaust valves?
I'm sure there's a real technical explanation for it. You're bringing in a greater, you want to bring in a greater volume of air and fuel. And once it burns, that volume is not the same.
The combustion process changes it.
It changes it, and so that's where the
difference in valve size.
Size. Plus, there's a lot of variables in cylinder head technology and camshaft, but you have what is called cam overlap, and that is when the exhaust is almost closed, the intake is starting to open. So in that, there's vacuum essentially pulling out the exhaust, helping pull the intake charge in. So if the exhaust valves were way too large or the same size, there's probably a good chance that you're going to lose that and the engine's not going to be efficient and make power. So I'm not the engineer. The engineers that build that stuff, that's where they're going with it. But that's the very basic answer to it, is combustion. The amount of combustion is different than what you're trying to pull in.
Makes sense. And this learning moment has been brought to you by Coors Light. Whoa. That little handy tool. I didn't know those things.
I did put a piston in this not too long ago, and I honed the cylinder, and the cylinder came out pretty good, which this is a Nicosil cylinder, and it takes a special hone. You know, he'll use it for the season, and then he's going to be doing a whole engine build again, but more in depth. The main focus right now is to get the transmission fixed. Obviously, if I see something else, then we'll address it. But over the winter time,
that's when the full rebuild and freshening will happen.
Yeah, it'll probably get the crank rebuilt and the piston and the cylinder replated or replaced and all those kinds of things. This was the oil filter that I pulled out of it, and
oh wow, it's got metal in there.
Yeah.
Wow. That's all from the transmission letting go.
That's what we think. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what we find when we get in there, but I don't see any like big heavy particles or anything in it. So piston still looks okay, but you can see there's marks in the skirt because the cylinder wasn't perfect to start with when we replaced the piston. But the other part of it is the last race that he went on, or second to last race, was sand. And I don't care how good the air filter is, that fine sand, it just goes through.
Finds its way into the engine.
Yeah, it finds its way. And a lot of times that's what's kills the rings, and then it just puts fine marks, vertical marks in the cylinder.
Looks like Mario's about to pull that piston. I'm going to pan over to the Honda project. It is a multi-part series we are currently underway doing. Part 1 came out last week. If you guys haven't seen it, be sure to check it out. Part 2 is coming soon, where we put more beautiful parts on that 450 race quad.
We're back over to the right hand. I'm not going to pull that piston off of there.
Not yet, okay.
I'm probably going to end up leaving it on there because if you take the circlips out, you need to replace the circlips. I could get more, but there's really no sense in doing that. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to leave it intact for now, unless I find something else that I should, that makes me want to go that route. But
just leave the whole thing, crank assembly and everything together.
Yeah, together. I got to continue. I got to pull the shift star out of it. So taking a look here, this spring-loaded roller, arm with a roller, is going into each one of these detents. So this thing is rotating when you're shifting gears. So what I'm looking for here is marks, any kind of hiccups. This is neutral. And so that is how it is. But you want to make sure that there's nothing that would create it to pop out of gear or not to shift. There's spring-loaded pawls that go into that assembly. I checked that when I removed it, and I didn't see any damage. Okay, this is the counterbalancer gear. This is the crankshaft. This is the counterbalancer. And there's a weight on there to counteract the weight of the crankshaft as it's rotating. So just bent that lock tab. I'm going to remove that. Okay, that one's out. Now we got to get the other one. Okay, you want to make sure that that piston doesn't go slapping around and hurt itself. I could have put there's like a gear lock that can go in there, and I could have done it manually that way. But usually these things come off fairly easy, so that's why I did it this way. All right. Again, looking at the gear face, make sure there's no chip or any like little pinhole starting where like porosity. That one looks all right.
No shavings on anything.
I don't see anything right now. oil is, I could smell it. It's burnt from that
Yeah,
clutch.
as soon as you took that off, I could caught a whiff of that.
It's brutal.
I thought it was just you.
I hope I don't smell like that. All right. Can't get the counterbalancer out yet. When you're removing or pulling an engine apart, is to separate. I do it in 4 bins: top end, right hand side, left hand side, and then the center section. That way, you're taking parts from this in a bin, you clean everything, you put it back. When you go to reassemble, if you have parts left over, obviously something's not right, and you can stop, fix it, and then move forward. So that's one thing that I really like to do. The other thing is, if there's uncertainty with removing stuff like oil pumps, little small parts with shifting, anything like that, is to put them in bags and label them. You don't necessarily have to label them, but you want to make sure that you're keeping things together and you don't have little bits and pieces all over the place, especially when you go to wash something. There's little springs in the shift mechanism. Definitely create havoc. This is a good point to mention too. A lot of or manufacturers, I should say, they like to do this. So there's a triangle here. Usually that triangle indicates where a copper washer should be. There's probably this is a through hole, so oil could come back out of it. And so that's why they do that. Another lock tab. The main winding, that's the pickup coil, crank sensor. I mean, they're called a bunch of different things. A couple things to look at here is make sure there's no metal debris that's on these 2 wire posts, because it can actually jump between it and cancel the signal, and you can get intermittent spark and the thing could die on you and all kinds of trouble. And then look in here, make sure these coils aren't burnt. And always make sure this stuff is tight. Look inside this. There's a metal ring that covers the magnets. This ring can rotate and then slide out. And then it will, we don't have the cover, but it'll chew all the wires. Cam chain. Look at the links here. That would indicate that something's bent or frozen. This is a screen that you normally take out when you're doing oil changes. Yeah, so there's some debris in that too. All right. I believe we're on to removing bolts for the center section. Let me take this out while I'm looking at it. There's a small O-ring here. We'll keep that off to the side. We're going to
replace that one.
I'm going to replace that one. Never give up. Is that the adage?
That's the attitude.
When you're a well-seasoned veteran in this type of thing,
Uh-huh. I can tell by the gray hair, you're seasoned all right.
Oh, yeah. I've done many.
You've done a thing or two because you've seen a thing or two?
Oh, yeah.
You've seen one up close, haven't you?
No, I have not.
So we agreed. You would be the talent on camera, and I would be the idiot behind the camera.
Yeah. Clutch pull arm.
If you guys have stuck around this long into the video, thanks for watching. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, and be sure to hit the notification bell as well so you don't miss out on part 2 of this engine, where Mario will rebuild the bottom end first, right?
Yep.
And then the top end second. And then it's up to Devin Jensen to get it back in the quad and win some more motos. It's fighting you, huh?
A little bit. There it is. All right, so it's not going to, I wanted everything to stay in that left-hand side, but it didn't, so. The balance shaft needs to be removed because it won't clear the other side of it. I'll have to take the other side apart. But I'm just going to
leave it as one piece for now.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it one piece, and I'll inspect everything, bearings. And
so this shaft must come up this way.
It does. So I thought, I mean, you could split it, but in order to get the crankshaft out, that has to come out. And that'll stay put. Well, that's one problem. See that? That shift fork's bent. We'll find out here in a minute, or the gear, maybe a circlip broke or something and it drove itself. But see how there's like no markings and that's clean here?
Yes.
This side should look the same way.
And you see some rub there,
yeah.
Is that a weird notch? Are you actually feeling a notch right there?
Yeah, I can feel that with that. I mean, you could see.
Oh, yeah, you can even see where it was shaving.
Yeah, this one's the same way. That's the left fork. This one down here is the right. There's 3 forks. There's a left, right, and a center.
5-speed transmission?
Yes. So what I'm looking for in here, this is the shift drum. I'm looking for any notching, scoring, anything that would hinder it to shift or, or help it to pop out, which we don't want either.
Now, what did he say it was doing? How was it behaving?
It was grinding really bad. Like he could get into first gear and then second, second, third, fourth, it would just...
metal on metal noise.
Yeah, it just sounded horrible. And so he stopped with it, which was good. So that shift drum looks okay. That fork shaft looks okay. I'll put it on a surface plate, though, and make sure it's not bent. Especially because I see damage on these 2 forks.
Show us this next one here.
Yeah, this is the same way. That side's okay, but this is...
Yeah. Clearly making contact with something. Now, what's it rubbing on is the question.
Well, it's rubbing on the gear, but it's cocked in there, and that's what's rubbing in the gear. That's why I say it's bent. But I'm going to see here in a minute. So this one looks okay. There's no scoring, no marks on that.
And that was the middle one.
Yeah, the center. So I will, again, I'm going to check that shaft that rides on, make sure it's not bent. But and that's the thing too. It's a good thing that he didn't continue to ride it. Obviously, if something broke and it sends shrapnel through it, that's not a good day. All right. That's the main shaft. This is the counter shaft. I'm just going to get them out of the cases here and move the cases out of the way, and then we'll inspect. Just want to make sure the bearings.
They all feel good?
Yeah, don't feel anything. Nothing wrong with the oil squirter. Make sure that I clean that. Nothing backed out. These, they're dimpled, so nothing backed out there. That's good. Got to get everything clean. This uses a case bond. It's not a gasket.
Yeah, you can see a little residue left over.
Yeah. Get that out of the way. So we're looking at the main shaft right now. And I'm going to make sure we got no gear teeth messed up. This gear is actually part of that shaft. Okay, looking at the dogs down inside there, it's kind of difficult to see. I don't know if the camera can pick that up.
Hold there.
That dog intersects down inside there. So you're just looking to make sure that it's not wore off. You know, a lot of times they'll get rounded off and it won't lock into the gear correctly.
Right.
But that looks okay on that gear. So like that is pretty good, that surface. This is starting, it's not bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad. It's not going to hinder the transmission from shifting or popping out. It's just, you could just see that, you know, something's starting to take place. That will probably get addressed come wintertime, because that's not going to do anything right now. All right, let's pull that. This is a better look at this inside where those dogs would intersect. It's got some light wear in there. That's normal. Looks okay. Nothing looks like it came apart. Like no, I was concerned that maybe the like a circlip or something that holds the gear assembly on maybe broke or popped out, but that's not the case. But this is a problem. And this was probably due to the shift fork. I don't know if you can see that in there, but that end of that is rounded off.
Yeah, I can see it. Let me zoom in on that. Hold it right there. That rounded off area.
Yeah. There's a couple of them like that, pretty bad. And then inside of where it intersects that gear is pretty wore. So it's going to need those two gears though, for sure. Anytime you take a circlip off, you replace it. And there's also a direction that circlips have to go on. Circlips are stamped, 90% of them are stamped. So one side's flat, the other side is rounded where the die presses it. You always have to make sure that in this case, for example, the gear load is going to want to go that way. Okay? So you have to make sure that the flat part of the circlip is on the load side. So it'd be flat, and then this is going to push. So it's pushing against flat. If it was round, it'd pop itself right out of the groove.
Right.
Okay, so it's going to need a couple of gears. Yeah, it looks like we figured out what's going on. I mean, it's got two bent shift forks, and it damaged two gears. This is second, and that's fourth. So obviously we have to replace them. We're going to replace that. I'm going to check the shafts that they ride on. I'm also going to check, I'm going to take the gears off and check that the counter shaft and the main shaft aren't bent at all. I don't suspect that they are, but
yeah, what might have caused the failure?
So it's possible that either, you know, landing a jump, casing a jump, landing on the shifter. I mean, a lot of times,
actual foot like hitting the shifter too hard.
Yeah, like he could have like came down in that load and then hit the shifter at the same time, it could have
enough force to bend a fork.
It's very difficult, but that's most likely one of those scenarios.
And if you watch Devin jump, he goes pretty big.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's definitely not off the gas. So.
Right. Very skilled rider, jumps it very big, puts a lot of abuse on his quad, I'm sure.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just, it just happens. And, I don't know if these got replaced ever. I don't know if the last person in the engine replaced them. So fatigue does come into play. I mean, these parts don't last forever. And it's really difficult to say, is that good for 30 hours or 60 or 10? It's tough.
Who's to say? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it looks like your next step is some cleaning.
Cleaning, estimate, parts list for Devin to get me parts. And then fun rebuild will be on the part 2.
Like we said earlier, it'll probably be a 3-part series.
Yes.
So part 2, he'll just do the lower end for us, fix the damaged parts, get it all back together. Part 3 will be the top end.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Mario, for the instruction and the teaching. And be sure to hit like and subscribe. We'll see you guys on the next video.